So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a taper here. To do this, I'm going to use a telescoping taper attachment that's on the back of my machine. If I wanted to cut a taper, I could also turn my compound rest on an angle and use this back hand lever to do that. But I'm going to show you how to use the telescoping taper attachment on the back of your machine to cut this taper.
Before going onto the machine, what we need to do is we need to calculate the angle in which I'm going to set my taper attachment to. So if I look on my drawing, the small diameter of my taper right here is going to be 700 thou, and the large diameter of my taper right here is going to be 875 thou. I also need to calculate the total length of my taper. So I'm going to take my 4.5 minus my 1/2 inch, minus my 0.375, and minus my 0.281. That will give me a total taper length of 3.344. So if I look, this is a drawing of my taper here. I have my overall length at 3.344. I have a 700 thou small diameter, and I have an 875 thou large diameter. What I need to do now is calculate my total taper, or my total change in diameter. So I just subtract my 875 from my 700 thou, and that would get me an angle of 175, or a side length of 175. So if I draw a triangle like this, I have a change of 175, and I have a length of 3.344. What I'm going to do though, because for trig and for calculating angles, I need to have a right angle triangle. So I'm going to cut this in half here. So this would be divided by 2. So I have a length of 3.344, and I have a height of 0.0875. So this is what my triangle would look like here. So now I need to do some trig. So I have my SOHCAHTOA. So if I look at my triangle, this is the angle that I'm solving for. I have my adjacent side here. I have my opposite side here, and I have my hypotenuse here. So I have opposite and adjacent, so that means I'm going to be using my tangent function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the inverse. I'm going to do the inverse of tan 0.0875 divided by 3.344, and that gets me a total degree right here of 1.498 degrees, which is what we're going to round up to 1.5 degrees. So this is what I'm going to set my taper attachment to. Something to keep in mind is that this is my center line angle. So the machine that I have, I set my angle to my center line angle. Some machines you might need to set it to the included angle, which in this case it would be 1.5 and 1.5, so you would set it to 3 degrees. Just verify in your operation manual what your taper attachment is set to.
What I have on the back of my machine here is I have this telescoping taper attachment. What I want to do is I want to have my tool kind of right, I want to have this telescoping taper attachment kind of right in the middle of the taper that I'm cutting. So I have it about here. And how this works is I have rails which ride on here, and when this is all locked down, as I move forward, the rails are going to push my tool away to get my taper. So what I need to do is I need to lock this down back here. So I lock this down, so this is engaging my taper attachment. And what I need to do is I need to set my angle back here. We already calculated that it's at 1.5 degrees, and it's really hard to see because it's dark, but I have a line right in the middle of my of this beam right here, and I have my degrees right here. So I have this set to 1.5 degrees for my taper. What I really want to be worried about when I'm cutting a taper is the backlash. There's lots of really good videos on YouTube explaining backlash, so I'm not going to take a ton of time explaining it. But essentially what it is it's the play in between the gears. So as I'm feeding in one direction, when I feed back, the gearing has a little bit of a space. That's to allow for lubrication and so the gears don't seize. So if I have my gear teeth here, if I'm feeding in one direction and I feed back, that movement where it's turning back is the backlash. So I can show you it here, okay? So let's say I move down to take my cut, and then I want to start to move in Z this way. Keep an eye on this dial. It's not going to move. I'm moving it quite a lot here, and I just see it start to move. The taper attachment engages. So what this is going to leave me with is it's going to leave me with a flat spot. It's going to leave me with a flat spot before my taper engages here. I don't want to have that because it's just going to make this shoulder distance incorrect. So to combat this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed in, and then I'm just going to feed until I get to the diameter that I want. Then I'm just going to remove the backlash. I can take the slack out and then engage my feed, and it'll get rid of the backlash. I'll do an example right now. So I have my cross slide here. I'm going to show you the first cut that I'm going to do. So I'm going to come in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed out a little bit, and then I'm going to engage my feed here. As you can see, it starts out as a bit deeper of a cut, and then it gets smaller and smaller until it ends. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it once it stops cutting. I'm going to wheel it away from my part, and I'm going to go back to my start point. I have the start point marked, so this is my 875. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to feed to the 0 here, and then I'm going to bring in my cutter. I'll get a closer cut of the cutter. I'm going to bring my cutter in. I'm going to bring it out just a smidge, and I'm going to engage my feed. And as you can see, it starts out as a deeper cut, and that cut gets smaller and smaller as it progresses in my Z. And it stopped cutting, so I'm going to stop it here, back it out, and go back to my start point, and go back to the start point here. Okay, on my last cut, so this is getting pretty close, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to lightly touch that 875 diameter, ever so slightly. So I'm just going to just give it a touch. A little bit of a chip came off there. Then I'm going to remove the backlash just by hand, and I'm going to engage my feed. Once it kind of just fades itself out, I'm going to stop it and shut my machine down. And if I look, I have a nice transition here. So I have my taper cut using my telescoping taper attachment.